the Roblox myth community, made for the sole purpose of a few friends to just make some stories and have some fun. Myth hunting has been a thing on Roblox for many years, but it wasn't completely popularized until the YouTuber Flamingo picked it up, which was around late 2017 to early 2018 to my knowledge. This would fully popularize the myth community, and groups arise such as RM and RMH, both groups surpassing over 200,000 members. But then some heavy misfortune became a detriment to the myth community, with pedophiles and toxic behavior just roaming around it, mainly due to the third-party apps that basically infiltrate the myth community, examples being Discord and Twitter. And due to Roblox's third-party policy, they're not able to do much about it. And in all reality, most of these people came out unprosecuted. These predators and toxic assholes roaming free in the myth community. With this myth community documentary, we'll basically be diving back into that, mainly covering the stories of predators, because they're probably the worst part about this community. But before I start, this took a really long time to make, so you may be seeing mic changes and also setting changes too, so if you catch that, don't be bothered by that. Because generally, this documentary has been in the works for around 8 months, so I really hope you learned something from this. But yeah, let's dive into our first story. Now before I talk about his situation, let's talk about the people involved in it, which includes his victims, HTTP and Taphiess, or also known as BLUUDRage. But this whole situation stems back to Taphiess. Now before this, I was able to talk to Taphiess, and she just gave me general information about a lot of things. And that includes how Kazdam, making Taphiess, who was presumably underage at the time, create a harem with Kazdam's current girlfriend. And what a harem basically is pretty much just two women sharing the same male combatant, which Kazdam's girlfriend at the time wasn't happy about, which what Taphiess explained to me made Heather, the girlfriend, hate Taphiess, which I'm positive that hatred is resolved by now, but that's against the point. Taphiess would also tell Kazdam a lot of personal stuff about herself, thinking of Kazdam as, you know, a best friend. She told her about her personal issues and all the stuff that I'm just not going to delve into for her personal privacy, but I think you get the general gist. But little did younger Taphiess know that Kazdam was only manipulating her. Considering Taphiess was around 16, I believe, at the time, this was pretty much outright grooming of a minor. And not only that, Taphiess found out that Kazdam was talking behind her back. But before we proceed on to the rest of the story, let's go to HTTP situation. Now at the time Ian Brendan Anderson or Kazdam talked to HTTP was 14 years old, and Kazdam decided to flirt with her. Kazdam even mentioning that wanted to fuck her while he was in a McDonald's, and then also pressuring her to send bikini pics, and even saying things like, hit me up when you're 16, which would mean Kazdam wants to do it to her when she's legal, but would still flirt with her even when she wasn't legal. And this would pretty much serve as deja vu to the Taphiess situation, where when Taphiess was 16, Kazdam would urge her for sexual pictures. So it's really not just a coincidence or just a general mishap. This is calculated behavior. But after all of this, Taphiess decided to come out with her and HTTP situation, and that was on the day of August 16th, 2020. And after Ian was caught, he hopped in a conversation with Hallows and Taphiess, where they were just clashing about this entire situation. And during the whole conversation, Kazdam didn't even deny anything, he just made up stupid excuses for it. Like for example, when he urged HTTP for sexual pictures, he claimed that he was drunk at the time and that his girlfriend was breaking up with him, and he was having a hard time coping with it. Which, if that was true, you could have coped other ways. Hitting on minors is not the ideal way to do that, nor is it legal. And this reached hundreds, maybe even thousands of people, with people like LxdySarah, Hallows again, Taphiess, everyone else, pretty much just coming out about this situation and talking about it. It eventually drove Kazdam out of the myth community, which is evidently shown by Kazdam transferring ownership to RM, then deleting his Twitter, being inactive on Roblox, and that was pretty much the end of it. The only times Kazdam was really ever seen again was when he hopped on alt accounts to try and pretend it wasn't him. And like, do you have to be on Discord that bad? Like, really the only person you can really talk to is probably like Papa Bread, and that's it. Which, if you don't know, Papa Bread was one of the people who defended Kazdam during this whole situation. And ironically, when he stopped sucking up to Kazdam, he wrote an apology. But yeah, Kazdam has no point to returning to Discord, except for potentially grooming other little kids. And you may be wondering, how are Taphiess and HTTP Cow doing? And while I can give a little update on Taphiess, I just can't give an update on HTTP Cow. I don't have any contact with her. But with Taphiess, she's now enrolled into I believe the South Korean military, and is now serving for her country. And I talked with her in general, and she said she was doing just fine. But the thing is, that's not all that Kazdam has really done. While these are very minor, no pun intended, compared to the rest of the situation, he's been pretty much notorious for being extremely lazy, and even talking behind people's backs. Like, for example, he had talked behind Joker Kid's back, the owner of RMH, where he was just saying how he thinks Caden is hiding behind a friendly mask and he's actually not that friendly. And yes, Caden's a friendly dude. I haven't talked with him myself, but from what I've heard, he's a nice guy. So I really don't see that being the case, and if that's the case, it's not really in a bad way, because we all put on a character sometimes. And it's also, a way of spreading positivity. And not only that, he would also put everyone he hated into the myth community blacklist. Like, even if they did nothing inherently wrong, Kazdam would just blacklist them. So you could probably really tell what kind of person Kazdam was. But yeah, that's really all I have to talk about with the Kazdam situation. And right now, I'm moving on to just a way darker subject that, like I said in the beginning, involves necrophilia, bestiality, and a lot more. This person that I'm about to cover is maybe one of the worst and most dangerous people on this documentary, so steer clear of this person. And after me talking about her like that, you may be wondering who this person is. So like I said in the transition, Cake3738 might be the most dangerous person covered on this documentary for numerous reasons. One being the overwhelming amount of things this person is sexually attracted to the point where it's not even legal anymore, of course taking into account that this person is an adult. And two being their manipulative tendencies with their peers if they don't get what they want. In other words, they're a reclusive man-child who goes on the internet to fetishize everything and prey on children. Now, long story short, on around April of this year, Cake was caught for everything she had done. And I mean everything. A document was wrote about her that includes overwhelming evidence of her being a pedophile, a general groomer, a necrophile, a manipulator, and the list goes on, but that's just the general gist of the situation. The name of this doc is Cake3738, Behind the Manipulation. Now this document has over 33 pages of content, with a plethora of screenshots being thrown across it, but in a very organized fashion, of course. Even starting out with the table of contents. And in these table of contents, it includes Cake's history of forging evidence, mass deleting messages, and editing their side to look innocent, as well as a middle of rape fetishes and asking to rape 13-year-olds. And category number 3 being admitted to obsession and being a real necrophile. And then category number 4 being borderline pedophilia to 13-year-olds. And the list goes on from there with a total of 7 listed categories in the table of contents, all being showed on screen right now, also being followed up with unlisted individual subcategories. Then below the table of contents are links to documents that contain all the victims' personal experiences with Cake, which, while I won't exactly be covering those, they will be in the description of the video. Though do keep in mind that one of the 4 documents are deleted, unfortunately, for unknown reasons, though the remaining 3 will be linked in the description. Anyway, the evidence presented in this document, as I said before, is groundbreaking and really exposes Cake3738's true character. But of course we'll be going in order with all the evidence presented in the document. Now of course we start off with the first and shortest category, which is Cake's history of forging evidence, mass deleting messages, and editing their side to look innocent. This shows screenshots of Cake's Twitter at the Roblox filter, trying to claim that all the evidence was forged when in reality, their argument fell apart the second it surfaced because the overwhelming amount of evidence presented has receipts, and there's just so much to point out where it just puts them in a corner they can't get out of. But the real evidence of Cake doing everything starts off with Cake expressing her fetishization of rape. So much to the point where she admits her sickening fantasies to a 13-year-old. And not only that, it is also followed with overbearing necrophilic proclamations. Her necrophilic remarks don't stop, with her admitting to being a necrophile to a friend and then trying to justify it. Which, if you're sexually attracted to dead bodies, it puts you in a category that is far from normal and more towards a menace to society type category. Speaking of which, we move on to more evidence that stems more towards pedophilia, which is so bad, the last few screenshots look tame in comparison. The first screenshot in this category being a picture of a Red Bull. Then Cake out of the blue mentioning that she was watching porn while talking to the 13-year-old, whom she sent that Red Bull to. Then the next screenshot is even more disturbing. This time, it consists of a word from one of the victims, K%, in which they would send screenshots of Cake sexualizing them, as well as confirming that they are 13. Then the screenshot that follows it up shows Cake semi-role-playing with K in a sexual manner. These bunch of screenshots also feature occasional NSFW being tossed around, along with a Discord conversation based around an incident of Cake flashing a minor in a Discord voice chat. Then we move on to the next category, and it reveals a lot. The title of this subcategory alone pieces together a lot of evidence that has been collected thus far in the document. The title basically confirming that Cake was in an open relationship with an underage person. This category also tackles Cake jabbing at their quote-unquote significant others' insecurities, where Cake initiated a bore roleplay until she pointed out that the significant other was insecure about their weight at the time. The victim even showing screenshots of her prefacing this to Cake in hopes that she wouldn't attack them for that. Not only that, this is also followed up with Cake trying a sexual roleplay with this person in a disturbing fashion, also adding on to the fact that this person was genuinely underage while Cake is a full-grown adult. This, of course, carries on until the person realized Cake was cheating on them, quote-unquote, and then rightfully so tells Cake off for doing that. And then it shows Cake attempting to lure them back, in a classical groomer fashion, of course, with threads of text where Cake begs for this person to forgive them in, honestly, the most obnoxious and manipulative sense anyone can. Then there's a seemingly unrelated screenshot where 5 days later, Cake is basically begging to sexually roleplay with this other person, which of course ultimately fails. Now, this next section includes very bold claims that, while they seem a little far-fetched, they still raise a few eyebrows in Cake's direction and present decent evidence to the claim. Now, basically what the claim is Cake pretending to be transgender in order to fetishize it for her own disgusting purposes. And yes, Cake is transgender, transitioning to female apparently. And I just want to preface that being transgender is completely fine. Realistically, I find no problem in being one. But if you fetishize gender dysphoria and all that, then you're disgusting. There's really nothing else to say about that. But getting back onto topic, the document then presents screenshots of Cake playing a mother character in a sexual roleplay that devolves into the victim getting down to their knees and such. And this raised a lot of eyebrows, and one person even came out with a statement saying how Cake was stalking and manipulating them, as well as spreading the belief that Cake may have possibly faked transgenderism, claiming that it was for sexual gratification and such. And with the evidence already presented, it seems pretty convincing. Then the next section tackles a somewhat darker and more depressing subject, which involves suicide, and I want to use this moment to say, if you have suicidal thoughts, please call a suicidal hotline. Like, you can really get help from all of those. And, you know, you do matter. Like, it's really a fact that you do matter. Though this segment involves Cake telling minors to kill themselves and then denying it, which is pretty straightforward and or out of context. Then there's one section I'm going to skip, because it consists of the same content that was already presented pretty much. So moving on from the other section, it's pretty much just a list of Cake's disgusting fetishes that have been recorded, which when you read it once, you'll never really want to read it again. Though I'll still leave the list up on screen for those who want to read it. Then the next section consists of Cake just brashly saying to someone that they might start drinking, presumably after the other person said something that Cake didn't like. And then Cake goes on a full-on for the full sake of just, you know, making this person feel bad and just manipulating them in general. And this rant is 2 fucking screenshots long. These rants including even more bodies of text after one of the victims disassociated themselves from Cake. And this rant went on for exactly 100 messages, accompanied by another 200 plus messages trying to get this person's trust again. Which, sorry Cake, never happened and never will. And yeah, that's the summary of Cake's situation, which is probably one of the most peculiar cases I've ever heard involving all these topics, which that alone says a lot about Cake. And moving on, we have 2 crucial stories to cover, both of which including interviews of the victims of the harmful people involved in the situation. And not to mention, both of these stories have a really close linkage to each other. And you may be wondering, what could these situations be? Now, the 2 predators in question are ZornieK and BlearGames. And BlearGames was someone I actually interviewed back when I was starting YouTube. And the reason for that was the pedophile allegations. But I soon unlisted that after I realized the entire thing was lackluster and not that good. But that's besides the point. The people I will soon be interviewing are Chev, the Zornie victim, and LxdySarah, the Blear victim. Now, before all this, I'm going to cover both of their stories individually, starting off with BlearGames. Now, Blear I actually used to work alongside with. We were both the game developers for RMH. Well, up until allegations struck her name, and that's pretty much when we kicked her from the development team. Now you see, LxdySarah actually came out with damning evidence of BlearGames trying to sexually roleplay with her, and also had inappropriate conversations with her. And that's pretty much self-explanatory. I basically got an interview with LxdySarah, where we pretty much talked about BlearGames and sometimes Zornie, but that was basically because Zornie and BlearGames were friends. But yeah, let's just cut to the chase.
The only reason I really come out about anything as of recent was because at first I wasn't really able to, because we were still friends up until I want to say August. But now I'm like, oh, well, everyone kind of realizes that she's a kind of a weirdo.
Yeah.
So I've been able to say more stuff. Yeah.
I've seen a lot of the DMs you put on Twitter, back in June, right?
Yeah.
And
which was even after I exposed her. Well, I think most of it was before I exposed her to begin with, but yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the weird stuff, was that alarming to you at first, or was there just an input oh, she's just joking, an instant instinct, you know what I mean? Nothing really thought about it.
At first, it was kind of oh, that's a little weird, and I didn't really know how to respond to it, and I think I've told you this before, but I was I didn't know how to react, because at the time I was very, very awkward and I was very antisocial. I did not have that many friends. So I was this is unusual. I've never seen this kind of interaction before. So I was unsure how to respond, and sometimes I'd ignore her. I remember one time, the one weird thing that she said, I ignored her at first, and then she responded to me again. She's like, hi, and then she repeated the thing that I ignored that she had said. I don't know if that makes any sense or if I explained it well.
Yeah.
But she repeated it once I ignored her the first time. I can't explain it, but yeah.
Okay, another thing I want to say is I do in fact believe that Blear did delete DMs, because when I was on the interview with her, I overlooked this, by the way. I very much did overlook this, and I apologize to you. But I clearly noticed that she did delete DMs. It's been made plain obvious, but she did do a good job at clearing them. I'm 99% sure that those were deleted DMs, and that they were not in fact photoshopped or inspected.
Yeah, and most definitely, because I've had friends who have DM'd me, and the formatting of the things that she said to them, I'm not going to mention names, but the formatting of the things that she said to them was very similar to the message she sent to me, that she said that I photoshopped, which obviously isn't true now. And I made a video about this a couple months ago, back in February.
Right.
It's privated now. Well, it's not private, but it's unlisted. But one of her friends back in, I want to say late June, had messaged me and showed me DMs of her admitting to lying about me photoshopping stuff. But, yeah, I don't even own the program. The closest thing that I own to Photoshop is a drawing program, and I use that to draw and nothing else.
Yeah. Well, the DMs that were screenshotted were quite blurry. That must have been a rendering issue, because that happens to me sometimes.
They were very cropped, and a lot of them were saved over and over again when I was sending it to different people.
Yeah.
I had a MacBook at the time. I don't anymore. So I was screenshotting it in a way that I regret screenshotting. So I was oh, well, people will believe me. Why would I have to show my full screen? But obviously, I had to show my full screen. I couldn't after she deleted the messages. So
I'll be honest, we all think like that sometimes.
Yeah.
When it's it really did happen. You think I don't have to present this completely. Because I know I'm completely right, which you would be in those kinds of situations.
Yeah.
So I get how you feel. Do you think Blear has any other, soft-spoken, well, that's not the right word, unspoken of victims, quote unquote?
Most definitely. I've talked with at least 2 people, I think, who have come to me saying stuff that she's told them. I'm not gonna name names, of course, because I know they're not comfortable.
Yeah, of course.
But they're well, Blair sent me this, and it's kind of weird, and I was yeah, don't talk to her anymore. So that was one example.
Yeah, and here's the thing. I'll be honest real quick. This comes out of my interviewer perspective in a way, but when during the Blear situation, I had no idea what to think. I was very ignorant at that time, let's say, and like I got to the point where like I listened to both sides of the story, but I realized while doing that I contradicted myself by being biased, and in a way, because I took things way too seriously, and when someone told me something, I'd kind of believe it. I'll be honest. And
Yeah.
I've gotten out of that mindset right now, and I'm just I'm trying to get to the bottom of this, because I know there's something going on, certainly, whether like.
And I don't blame you for it at all, because a lot of people at the time, they did not believe me, and rightfully so, because she was a very popular dev within the RMH community. So
Yeah,
like
and
people obviously like looked up to her and stuff.
what's fucking bonkers is like I worked aside of her. I was one of the builders for like RMH, and like to see her, like I talked to her in the following months. Well, like not the following, but like the pre-following months. I really don't know the word for it, but I talked with her while we were building. Like, she was a little cuckoo, but I didn't think much of it. And like, it's weird because me working with her kind of gave me this complex where it's like, maybe I should hear her out a little more than other people are doing. But like, that was just me at that time, because I worked with her. We didn't talk too much, but it was, I don't know, it was certainly something. Like, yeah, it was hard for me to, it was a hard pill for me to swallow. But I wonder, do you think like what do you think, like, prosecution wise, what do you think Blear should be? Should they go to 100% go to prison, or should they just be reevaluated and fully learn from their mistakes?
Because I don't think the things that she's done have been like so bad to the point where she could go to prison for it. Like she hasn't like exchanged certain pictures with like any minors that I personally know of, but she's just been very like sexual with them, I guess.
Yeah, I saw like one where she was like saying shit about dragon mom boobs and rubbing them. Well, I won't go into full detail, I'm sorry. Like dragon mom boobs or something, and doing an act with them with you. That's what I saw.
That was like one of the main images that were floating around that she said I photoshopped, which was not true.
Do you think she's really doing her best to cover this up?
So from what I've seen, she does go on Twitter a lot, and I see her like retweeting like posts calling out pedophiles, and I said this on Twitter like a day or two ago. And I think she's trying to make it seem like she knows that this stuff is wrong and that she couldn't have ever done it because she knows it's wrong.
Yeah, it's kind of like...
Yeah, she's just trying to cover up or something. I don't really know.
Yeah, it's kind of like the David Dobrik situation, which I don't want to go too deep into that, but I know he tried to PR his way into, like, getting himself out of that situation. And, like, Blear, doesn't have a PR team, so, like, he's just using, what they've got to, like, oh, he's retweeting anti-pedophile tweets. That means she's not a pedophile. Woo! Like, like, it's something, that people with I guess a victim complex, or a developing victim complex, I can't pronounce things, victim complex, share, is that they retweet, like, or even if it's not Twitter, they endorse like people taking out their own kind to stay out the water of the other people,
Yeah.
Like, have you guys talked ever since?
So after that video was made, we all, like me, her, and another friend, that other friend, ironically enough, was like caught out for being a groomer of some sorts. I'm not going to name names because I don't really know how true that is. But we all got into a group chat and we talked it out. At the time, I was still very iffy about being friends with her, and I didn't want to be friends with her. But I felt like I had to, because I was scared if I wasn't. And we talked up until, I want to say, August, and then I just started ignoring her. My Fiddlepat, he called her out about something, and that like really opened up everyone's eyes, and they're like, oh wow, this person is really bad.
Let me go into more into detail about the scared thing. Why were you so scared? Like, not like because of your thing, but like did she say something to enact that fear?
There was this one thing where she tried to be friends with me again, and she invited me to one of her Discord servers, and her ex didn't, or I think it's her ex at this time. He did not like me, and he even like was saying like really threatful things in her DMs about me. And like this is like a 19-year-old talking about a 15 or 14-year-old at the time. I'm not sure how old I was. So that's kind of weird, and that kind of frightened me a little bit.
I see. Yeah, and you know, with the groomer thing, do you think, you know, there's other people out there like, you know, Blear is friends with that are also in the myth community that could possibly be doing the same thing that she was caught doing?
I would definitely say so, because I knew she was friends with Zornie, and I don't know if you've already seen the post about Zornie, but Zornie was caught out by it.
You know, I've heard of Zornie before. Okay, so pause here. This interview was actually recorded before I knew who Zornie was. But yeah, please keep that in mind. Was that your latest tweet? Because I remember.
Yeah, I did talk about Zornie in my latest tweet. This person named, I forget what their name was. I feel bad. Yeah, Hedgie Sonic. They were like trying to defend her, and I believe Blair might be friends with them. But this other person named Chev was the person who called out Zornie about being a pedo, which Blair is friends with Zornie, and I don't know. I worded all that wrong because I'm getting the names mixed up.
Of course.
But yeah.
And all right, so do you think Blear should come out in public and, you know, apologize? You think she should clear up the air more clearer than she already polluted it? You know what I mean?
I would like her to. The thing that I know that she's doing is she's going into people's DMs telling them stuff about me. I've only seen one example of this.
Oh, actually, I do have something. I do have something. She's actually talked to me concurrently. Well, not concurrently to right now, but like there were times where, you know, I haven't talked to her since November, but
yeah.
I mean, like, I don't know. This is when I was, like, a little more naive in the past, where, I don't know, like, some of it was just her, you know, sharing her sense of humor. I don't know, I never understood that, but that's against the point. There's other things. She was talking about Fiddlepat and how one time she was added to a group chat with Fiddlepat, and she tried to, from my understanding, kind of paint him as like as someone who, you know, harassed her.
I wouldn't know much about that.
All right, but I'll screen share if that's okay.
All right, that works.
And then like I'll just stop screen sharing, and then I'll get your input afterwards. You know what I mean? So.
All right.
So far unsafe, stressed, and has caused me to question myself a lot. What do you think on that line alone?
I don't really know, because I feel like she does this thing where she just guilt trips people a lot. And she even did that to me when I first called her out. She said that she was like contemplating suicide and like flooded my DMs about like just guilt tripping me whenever I first called her out. So I think she does that like a lot. I don't know. It's kind of, can you zoom in at all?
I'll just read it for you if that's okay.
Okay.
Dude, stop. Do you not see they are using you to try and get a screenshot of me admitting to something I'm not? They want to be right for once. Let them scream at a wall. They'll get over it.
Yeah, she's always done this thing where she's done this to me before. She's come to my DMs saying like warning me about certain people. And even like I got to know these certain people and they weren't even that bad at all. She just like warns people about people that dislike her, I guess, if that makes any sense. It's manipulation at best in a way.
And yeah, again, a special thanks to LDLE for opening up about all this stuff. And it's really a lot to consume, with all this crazy stuff going on that shouldn't have been a thing in the first place. But now we're moving on to ZornieK, who has a bit more substance in this situation. So Zornie basically sent a lot of inappropriate stuff to this person, Chev, who is actually a minor. And Chev was unfortunately one of the people who fell for this rabbit hole. And it's not his fault at all. He was being manipulated. Zornie had also sent very bestialic-esque Rule 34 imagery to this person, and we get more into detail in the interview.
We originally met, as I stated in the original tweet, in the gathering of followers She was just a friend of mine. She, we hung out a bit. It usually involved some, I don't know, I guess I would say NSFW things. It wasn't all the time, but it was certainly enough to the point where it was very uncomfortable, looking back on it now. And it was, I guess it was just a normal friendship up until, it just got so heavy into everything else.
I understand. And that being said, I noticed there was a lot of conversations where, you would, I guess, role play. If I want to, I don't want to phrase it that way, but
It's fine. It's fine.
yeah, there was a lot of conversations with role play and all that stuff, and it's been noticeable that, like, you may have thought it was a bad thing, but you weren't aware that this was it. Is that true?
Yeah. I wasn't, at the time, I wasn't totally aware of, what I was doing was a bad thing. I thought it was something friends do. It's certainly not something that friends do, and it's, taken quite a toll on me. But, yeah, the whole thing about roleplay, quote unquote, was, I don't even know how to describe it. It's embarrassing, certainly, to look back on. But, yeah, it's I don't know.
Now, up until, like, before the tweet thread, I guess, did you have any, did you notice that this was starting to get, like, more and more to your head, to that it's a little messed up that she's doing this with you?
It left my mind to a certain point up until, my good friend Leech made a tweet about Zornie's actual age. And I learned that it was only last year that she was 19, which is, above the age of 18, legal adult, all that, fun, quote unquote, fun stuff. My mind has been messed up from, quite a while now since I've been on the internet. And it was quite a shocker to learn that, what actually happened to me was grooming, as I've supported many victims of it before and never thought once that it would happen to me in the way that it did with Zornie.
I understand. And, I know you are kind of active on social media and all that stuff. So did you have any things to indicate, or have you told Zornie that you were around this age? How old are you?
I am 15 now.
That's a big age gap, and I know, like, how this could have affected you, man. Like, how old did you think Zornie was at that point?
Originally, I thought she was kind of around my age, like 15 to 16 maybe. I didn't think she was, as old as she was. I didn't really understand at the time that, she was that much older than me, and I don't really think she ever explicitly stated her age, which, it was kind of weird looking back on it now. I'm surprised I didn't catch it, since I'd read so much shit about other victims and stuff, but
yeah.
No, it was definitely a shocker.
Yeah.
To learn that she was 19, now 20 or something, I don't know.
Did you have anything to indicate that you were underage? Did you ever mention that to her, or?
Yeah, I did mention it. It wasn't a constant mention that I was 14,
And you shouldn't really have to, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely weird that the first thing in our DMs was ever, Rule 34 imagery of something that is kind of gross to describe, but it was, definitely weird of me to kind of start the roleplay, but then again, it's really just weird how she continued with it, and I did explicitly state that my age was 14. I can pull up the screenshot if needed, but...
I get it, but yeah, I've seen the thread. Did you notice that she did send you bestialic type of imagery? Now,
Yeah.
There's like a difference between, like, furry porn and, bestiality.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I noticed that there was one where there was a drawing of two cats, or no, there was a picture of two cats, and then it was an adaptation of that in a kind of Rule 34 sense. Now, what do you think of that to begin with, and what do you think of it now?
To begin with it, I genuinely didn't, process it. I didn't even, if I look back correctly, I didn't even respond to it, and, it was just confusing to me. I don't know why I was sent it. But looking back on it now, it's certainly weird. I don't know why she would send that to anybody on the internet, regardless of whether or not they're a minor. But
And
it was,
yeah, and I noticed she sent a plethora of not safe for work hentai imagery. Now, and then there was also that roleplay thing. So, do you think she was very much aware that you were that you were underage, or did she just genuinely think like, she kept it in mind, but she didn't really care, or she just really was not that aware at all? But it still doesn't justify her actions, of course. But I just want to get your input because, like, how did she sound when she made those remarks in the DMs? Like, did she treat you like you were kind of, an adult? You know what I mean?
in a sense, yes, she would treat me like I was an adult friend with the pornographic images, but then again, she would make remarks to me such as good boy, stuff like that. It was,
Yeah.
very but yeah, I don't even know. Like, I try to justify in my head that yeah, she was aware, but then again, she's obviously mentally ill, so I don't know if she just forgot or something, or just, I believe she just didn't care, because I've met people with more memory problems and I've seen them remember pretty important information such as that.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in because
Yeah.
We've all had that thing at points. Well, not all of us, fortunately, but a lot of people are in the same shoes that you are, and it's odd because I was in that same situation that you were before, and to realize that that the same thing you were denouncing, you were a victim of.
It's as I think I've stated before. Sorry, my memory's a little bit
It's okay.
all over the place, but it's definitely a scary thing to realize that you spend a lot of your time defending your friends who have been harmed by this stuff before these horrible people who have no care for the mindset of the other person or their innocence in some cases, considering most of them are children. And learning that you're a victim of the same thing is just probably one of the scariest experiences that I think you could ever go through. Regardless of whether it's in real life or online, I'm pretty sure it affects most people the same way it does, others, in the terms of making it uncomfortable to the point where you're sick to talk about it sometimes, or, you just get nightmares, which has happened to me a few times. It's just, yeah, scary is certainly one word among many for it.
I understand. And what was it like confronting Zornie, if you did, even at all? Because I know it's quite difficult to do that. So I would understand if you really didn't do it initially and you just posted that tweet before you initially confronted them, or
if I had I ended up joining a different group that I probably won't name for the sake of it not being exposed to more drama than it has already. It was very minor drama, but I met her in a different group of friends and stuff, and we had talked a little bit. At the time she was drunk when I had initially DM'd her after a few months of silence, and I had been the one to apologize for quote unquote being weird to her and for engaging in those kinds of acts. And looking back on it now, I realized it really wasn't my place to completely apologize.
Yeah.
And that was sort of quote unquote confrontation. And after the initial tweet was posted, she ended up DMing me on Twitter, and we had talked in DMs, and she had tried to convince me that whatever happened was not about my age, and it was just supposedly like kind of a miscommunication. But then again, she was like, I'm afraid I was going to upset you by stopping, which made no sense whatsoever to me.
That's an odd complex to think that you'd hurt someone you're not even supposed to be talking about with this kind of stuff, you know, hurting their feelings about stopping doing an actual crime, you know?
Yeah, it's certainly weird to think about. Yeah, I'm gonna make this person upset, you know, by not sending them you know, furry, inappropriate images. Or, yeah.
And obviously, you know, you interacted with this person, well, I wouldn't say willingly because, you know, you're under, of course, the age of consent.
Right.
But, you know, you did participate in that, and, like, how did you feel guilty about doing this?
For a time, I did feel guilty, honestly, because it was looking back on it, it's just kind of a point of degeneracy. Even if it was just a year ago, I feel like I've tried to grow from it and, you know, not engage in that kind of talk anymore with anybody, regardless of who they are, their age, whatsoever. It's just kind of degenerate to a point. That's just what I consider it,
I
degeneracy.
understand.
And yeah, for a point of time, I did feel guilty about it. But then again, I realized it wasn't entirely my fault, as I'd been, you know, kind of goaded into responding in certain ways. And she hadn't stopped. Sometimes she'd be the first one to initiate some of the conversations. And sometimes, you know, I would be, and then she'd continue them. And it's all kind of weird. And yeah, guilt was one part of it, but now kind of accepting the fact that, yeah, it's a learning experience not to kind of do that again, so you don't end up in the same situation.
Do you think this has any correlation with, you know, the weird shit going on with the myth community? Do you think there's a certain pattern? Because there's been many people caught doing the same thing that Zornie has been caught doing, like such as Vouralen and Cake just this month, or Cake 3738, I believe.
Yeah, I knew that person as well. God forbid. Hope I never get to meet him again. But it's a pattern is certainly a word for it. It's a very unspoken about problem up until now, and I've seen it before happen so many times where it's just these victims get, you know, attention, and it's really what they need because, you know, it's exposing these horrible people for what they've done to other people. And it's, you know, it repeats itself, and it just constantly repeats itself. And I definitely think it's something wrong with the myth community because you have so many adults in a game made for children, and, you know, mixing that many adults, mixing this many children with, you know, complete anonymity unless each side decides to expose themselves. Sorry, it breeds such a weird kind of area for so much of this stuff to happen.
And since, like, Roblox is a kids game, and plus there's an underground community, there would be some aspect for the predators to get away with this kind of stuff because the myth community isn't big enough to reach this as a mainstream thing where,
Of course.
You know, the law would even bother to get involved because, like, you know, like, this doesn't get too much attention. Like, well, there's lots and lots of people that know about the Kazdam situation. Like, I can't name a single person that knows about the Kazdam situation outside of the myth community.
Exactly.
And
It's definitely a thing that hurts the victims in a sense because these people, beyond punishment from their peers, they'll never receive true punishment from, let's say, you know, the law for harming minors, for grooming innocent people, for, you know, causing so much, just, I don't know how to say it without being, like, so over dramatic, but pain. It's just these people have been traumatized in a sense from this because they've been taken advantage of, and it's just when you don't have the platform in some cases to make it such a mainstream issue, and when, you know, certain content creators, of course, their audience is mostly children, it's very hard to make them care, much less have them listen or, you know, kind of report it, take action. It's all very hard, especially with underground communities such as this. Usually the only publicity I kind of see nowadays, and in my case what it was Twitter threads, and they do work. They do really work well because the more retweets you get, the bigger an audience it's spread to. But it's also like you had things such as, podcasts. They were a really big thing in the myth community for a while, and they helped spread a lot of issues, honestly, that were plaguing the community at the time, such as, BlearGames, just general toxicity and stuff like that. But it was also, that was for a period of time. It never really kind of...
It never
stayed.
stuck.
Yeah, it's just another kind of, it's just wasted potential, honestly.
Yeah, it's a shame, and I think a podcast is a great idea, honestly, but
Yeah.
I even myself wanted to make a podcast at one point, and I might still do it, and it may I want to try and revive that kind of thing, but like not just with the myth community, but like with Roblox as a whole, if you get what I mean, because
Yeah.
like I can dig these topics that are more mainstream along with other topics that many people may not have heard of, which would get more awareness along with the interest of those mainstream topics. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I get that.
I want your voices to be heard, because it's a hard thing to just get this covered and no prosecution being held towards this person.
It's kind of also hard because some of these people just, I would say even Blair to an extent, just, it's almost like they don't care. They're kind of, oblivious to everything that's kind of happening to them. And, that's why they continue to do it. It's when you don't have true consequence, such as, let's say something like, being reported to the police, having an investigation done on you. It's happened in some cases, but in a lot of these cases, it's just, you can't find any sort of criminal justice, because it's a thing with the legal system too in a lot of countries, not just America, but online crimes really aren't seen as too important, because you see people like, Chris Hansen, let's say, you see very independent kinds of justice being taken, and of course they collaborate with police forces and all that other stuff, but it's really just, it's not seen as such a big issue. And the more we can make it an issue, like that needs to be spoken about, reviewed and all that stuff, if we can just build that up, I'm sure it would help a lot of victims get their stories out, help a lot of horrible people be exposed, and it would also lessen the burden on the victims, and know that no matter what they do, these people just get away with it somehow. And I think that's just what these people need to not get away with it.
What really do you have to say about this, like, in conclusion?
Well, to the predators, to the groomers, to the abusive people in this godforsaken community who have hurt so many people, genuinely go and fuck yourselves. To the victims, to the people who have been hurt by these people, who have suffered the abuse at the hands of these people with such large voices, you're not alone. You're certainly not alone. And I genuinely hope that a lot of you can come out with your own experiences to help to warn other people about what these people did to you. And if you don't feel comfortable with coming out about it publicly, that's fine. Just please try and take the initiative to talk about your problems and work yourself up to a point where you can say, what this person did to me wasn't right, and I want to talk about it.
Anyway, yeah. Huge thank you to Chev for coming on. Like, he's a real brave dude just coming out about this stuff, because all of this is just fucked up. And with that being said, there's actually a lot more things about ZornieK and BlearGames that kind of highlight a pattern. Now, just a warning, this is just a speculation, but it's basically something I discussed in the interviews at points. And if you didn't want to watch the entire interview, this will kind of come up as a sum up. Now, what I found quite interesting was Zornie and BlearGames are actually very close friends, before and after they were called out. out. And it's funny because they were both exposed as predators, both in very similar forms. And I found that to be an odd coincidence. Now, what I'm trying to say is Blear and Zornie might not be the only problems, at least in these situations. And what I realized is Zornie's and Blear's group is full of manipulated children and other recluses as well. Now, that may sound far-fetched, but let me explain. Now, there's someone in Zornie's friend group by the name of Fixed Doctor, and I will admit I used to associate with this guy, but that was a long while ago. Now, over the past months, he's been known as a Zornie supporter, trying to defend them in any form they can. And while I completely disagree with his actions, there's something you gotta take into account. Now, knowing Fixed Doctor, I can only conclude a few things. Number one being, he's very vulnerable to manipulation. Now, you have to take two things into account for this prediction. Number one being, he's around my age. And number two, he's shown to be very mentally disturbed. Now, the reason I say mentally disturbed is because, and this was a very public situation by the way, but he had to go to the mental hospital at one point due to reasons I can't describe, but what I can say is people that are in his mental state and at his age, it shows that maybe a little manipulation was taken into place. And Zornie, to my knowledge, is 20. Fixed Doctor is around 14 to 15. And again, this isn't me defending his actions. This is absolutely false. I'm just trying to pinpoint a reason as to why he would think these kinds of things. And love him or hate him, this may be the possible reason as to why he's defending Zornie. And by the way, don't misconstrue this. This is a reason, not an excuse. I want to preface this as much as I can. Now, I found another example of a Zornie supporter, which is EquinoxGuardian. And yes, I'm name dropping and I'm not sorry. Now, I also have a personal story with this guy. Like, this motherfucker tried to act as Zornie's lawyer or something, I don't know. But as you can see from the text, you can already see that he's gonna be a snarky asshole. So he friends me, and then I start off with hello. Then he starts off with heya, so we have a small problem. And then I say, we? How so? Yes, we. My good friend Zornie has informed me that she does not wish to be in the documentary you are making. And he's referring to the first sneak peek I put out. And then he said, so I wanted to see if we could talk that out. And before you accuse anyone, I asked to contact you. She did not send me after you or any of that. Which I find as complete bullshit, because who would have told you this was going on? Like, I checked as much as I could, and this guy doesn't have a Twitter at all. So someone must have told him. And then I'm like, yeah, you go ahead, man, I'm all ears. And at that point, I already knew that guy had no point to begin with, because while the evidence in sneak peek number 1 was lackluster, the second sneak peek completely blew that out of proportion. But of course, this was before sneak peek 2 was out. Now, I wasn't kidding when I said this guy was acting as a lawyer. So after I'm like, okay man, I'm all ears, he's like, so it has been made clear that she doesn't want to be in this. So I think it'll be simple enough to find another myth instead of her to document. Does that sound fair? Now, as you can see here, this guy is totally the moral compass and I got everything completely wrong. Ugh. Yeah, no. Now you see, I'm allowed to talk about public situations. Now, if I were contractually obliged to keep my mouth shut, that would be a completely different story, but it's just a general public situation that someone has already talked about, and it's of someone committing a crime, so that's pretty much evidence. And then I follow up saying, you know, you didn't present any groundbreaking evidence to incline me to do so. Like, all this dude really said was like, oh, you don't have her consent, you don't have her consent, and like, dude, I don't need her consent for this situation. Do you think Chris Hansen goes up to the pedophiles beforehand and say, hey, we're gonna be moderating your texts that you do in Omegle, or whatever the fuck they used in the 2000s, I don't know. Like, do you think they just say that straight up to the pedophile? And you could make the argument that it was just a general sting operation, but it doesn't change my right to cover this. And then he basically just keeps repeating everything else and is like, blah, 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 doesn't have your consent. And it just shows that this man hardly did any research. Because 6 days before, the main victim, Chev, posted their story with extensive evidence that pretty much proved the grooming claim. And yeah, I already talked about that, so I won't blabber about that too much. But what I can conclude from that is I could tell that this person is an adult, so it's pretty clear with him there's something fishy going on. Because for one, he did try to claim that Zornie didn't send him when we all know that was the case. Like, I mean, him lying just made it worse for himself. And do you know how I know he's lying? Well, beforehand, Zornie actually friended me on Discord and sent me DMs basically questioning her relevance on this documentary. And pretty much the whole situation is on Twitter. I'll send a link to that in the description. But the other thing I didn't share is that she went straight to Blear and started ranting in her DMs because Blear was ignorant enough to send me that. And afterwards, that's ironically when EquinoxGuardian DM'd me. So I'm not too sure about that, Chief. And this was like maybe 15 minutes after me and Zornie got into that argument thing. So nice try trying to cover that up. You made it blatantly obvious just by stating it. Now, can I conclude that this man is a pedophile or a groomer in any way? Absolutely not. Can I confirm that he's an adult? Not really, but through his formal and grammatically correct sentences, I can tell he's certainly not a kid. And then here's Exhibit C of a Zornie supporter. Yeah, I'll just leave it off there. And by the way, he did take that picture himself with his own consent, which is even weirder. And he's also another instance of an adult defending Zornie. So that pretty much gave me the theory that most of BlearGames and ZornieK's mutuals may replicate the same behavior as they've been caught doing. And again, that's just a speculation. I said that in the interview, but it could be a possibility. And with that being said, that's pretty much all I have to say about the predators in the community, and that we can now move on to the general toxicity. And for this part, I pretty much brung on some myth community veterans, and for a few minutes we pretty much talked about the toxicity and all of that stuff. And I'm already pretty much worn out from the predator segment, so this toxicity segment will be a lot shorter, and most of it won't even be covered by me, since I've gathered some people from the myth community to join me in the segment. But anyway, let's get to that.
I think every community has their wolves in sheep's clothing, you know what I mean? Like, people aren't how they seem on the surface. There are layers to people, like layers of their personality, of their inner dark secrets, their mental illnesses, like fucking pedophilia. So I think they've always been around. They've just now come out to resurface because of how many fucking children there are in the community.
It definitely takes a lot of people to like consider twice about who they're friends with. It's like, what if this person is actually like a very bad person?
I had gotten into drama with some people about some things, and it was really it's when I look at the myth community, or looking back, I look a lot at how a lot of the drama, at least that I went through, was so dumb. Like, you'd never see regular people in real life getting into some of the drama that like I got into or other people got into. I look at, like, one time I got into the drama with this one person about how he was basically he was just saying some of the dumbest stuff, and I was just like, hey, stop saying that. Like, if you had that kind of conversation with real people, they would be like, oh, okay, my bad, and it would kind of not really progress from there. But these people just pick it up and they keep going, and they choose to turn it into drama, and that's kind of that I started to realize that a lot more.
Like with other communities, say like war clans or any other kind of community, it'll never be able to revert back to the way it used to be. We as a community can at least better it for people that come by in the future, instead of just wanting to tear it all down. Technically, the community will never actually absolve. The roots of it may be gone, the groups may be gone, but myth hunting as like a genre, it probably will never cease.
I don't think any community really deserves to die, because it brings a lot of light to people's lives, even if it's just like fucking small or really meaningful, like huge.
Yeah.
Destroying this community means destroying people's happiness, even if it's just a small little bit of happiness, and I think that's fucking evil. If people don't want to like hear about the myth community anymore, they can just leave. The door's like right there. They can just leave at any time they want. But this community has opened a lot of doors for fucking developers and shit like that. It's just like it's been very helpful to a lot of people, so they can move on to greener pastures. Caden just became a YouTuber.
Exactly.
And he made that his job. That's been his dream for like as far as I can remember. If people want to take that away from people, then they're just probably not succeeding in what they do. And that's why they want to take things from others.
I made a lot of memories, a lot of good and negative ones, but it was a good impact, especially over COVID. Meeting a lot of those people, it kind of helped me out. And I know you had asked me a lot about kind of like, do you think the negatives overshine the positives? And that kind of depends on the year for me. You want to ask 2019 me if I thought the myth community was everything? I'd say yes, I love this community so much. But it just got too dull. Everything that just started to happen, it was upsetting. It was tiring, very, very tiring, with the drama that would happen between other myths, other groups, even drama between the myth community and other communities. It was exhausting. It got exhausting.
I mean, there are definitely some fucking dark parts about it, but I'd say the good outweighs the bad in most cases.
I was talking with someone about, There's issues with, you know, things like third-party sites that are being utilized with the myth community too, you know?
Yeah, like Discord,
Yeah.
Twitter,
And
anything like that.
yeah, with third-party sites like that, you know, that it's out of Roblox's hands at that point. It's the Discord.
Yeah, they have a fucking term for that, like in their terms of service. They don't rock with anything outside of their website. Yeah, they don't fuck with that at all. So if someone like molests a kid in real life from Roblox, then they're not going to do anything about it.
Discord has been known as a very, easy way for, those sort of people to easily worm their way into communities and, prey on others.
Obviously, the same thing goes for like many other websites. Twitch is kind of an exception because they've gotten flack for dealing with outside of their website. So this isn't a problem with just like the myth community. Like predators are well documented, but it's just Roblox that won't do anything about it. If this happened in like any of the big communities, like Adopt Me for example, they still probably wouldn't do anything about it. I feel like in horror communities it's much more common because fucking mental illness is higher within those types of communities.
Exactly.
Like creepypasta. I could probably name a few others if I think hard on it, but I don't think we have the time.
But yeah, that's pretty much it. In conclusion, please send love to the victims that I interviewed. I want to leave off the conclusion as a thank you moment. I want to thank LxdySarah and Chev for coming out about this type of stuff. These topics were very tough to cover, and they're just brave souls for just sticking around and speaking out. I also want to thank Reckless Havoc, Universities, and Lucas for joining me on the toxicity segment. And I also want to thank Blue Mirror as well for just really helping me with the construction of this documentary. I cannot thank him enough. He pretty much helped me with this documentary since day one, and I'm just so glad I got to work with him. Real cool dude. I also want to thank Tarsierific for making the thumbnail art, which honestly looks stunning, and they deserve a lot of credit, because I cannot preface this enough. They did such a good job on it, and I could not ask for anything better. And this documentary has been almost, maybe, half a year in the works, and this was all for the victims in question. They deserve every single ounce of love that's given to them, and they deserve a lot more. This documentary was made for the sole purpose of informal purposes, and serves as a reference for how to stay safe in the myth community, you know? And this is in no way, shape, or form to attack to other people within it, because there are some good people in this community, and it has a big issue with predators and toxicity, and they're just caught up in that, and understand that they aren't the root cause. But I think that's all I really want to preface. So yeah, stay safe and take care. And also, this video is for a good cause and not for my personal benefit. And if I can, I'll find a charity that I can link in the description that helps these root problems. But yeah, please take care. And again, this is my final documentary, so you won't see anything like this from me ever again.
MF Doom,
Mr. Fantastic,
Mr. Fantastic.
Villain.
What up, nigga?
Ain't nothing, what's the word?
It's cracking, boy.
Same old shit, kid.
Man,
Day, you
rap
know?
snitches, man. Shit is bugged out, man. What the fuck, man?
Shit, telling me.
Niggas running their mouth, telling everything. Everything.
Critical.